Jenkins is very commonly used application in any organization. And this is used mainly for automation server, continuous integration server, or CI/CD pipeline, which is called continuous integration or continuous deployment pipeline. And when you work in AWS environment or hybrid cloud environment, one of the very common project you get to deploy Jenkins server. And in this lecture, I'm going to show you every steps to build Jenkins server using Terraform. One of the key resource for building Jenkins server is IAM role and policies. And it is always encouraged to use role because role does not have a long-term keys. And role is an IAM resource. And IAM is a global service. And role is an IAM identity that has a specific permissions. Permissions are basically a policies. As I said, role does not have a long-term credentials like IAM user has. That's why it is always encouraged to use. Role can be assumed by the service, user, or applications. These are the resources we are going to create to build a Jenkins server. First, we're going to create EC2 instance and then update the user data to install Jenkins application, including the dependent software. And then we're going to create IAM policy document and policy resource. And then we're going to create IAM role resource and attach that policy to the role and assign that role to the EC2 instance. And that's all. And here is a simple example of a policy document which allows S3 list bucket. But for Jenkins server build, we have a separate policy documents. I will get to that. And we create a role and assign that policy to that role. And here is the architecture which we are going to implement using Terraform. We have an AWS account. And in that AWS account, we have a virtual private cloud, VPC. And in the VPC, we have a subnet, which is a public subnet. For the simplicity reason, we're using public subnet. But in real scenario, in the project, when you do, you should not use public subnet because you don't want to expose your Jenkins server to external world. It would be always private subnet. And in the public subnet, we're going to create a EC2 instance, which is Jenkins server. And we will update the user data to install Jenkins application. And we will create a security group resource, attach that security group resource to the Jenkins server EC2 instance, and we will assign the role to the EC2 instance. And then we will log into the EC2 instance and verify the AWS commands without any credentials because the role itself takes care about that credentials. Let's jump into the lab. So we're going to create all the Terraform files from the scratch. And first we're going to create EC2 instance, then IAM policy, IAM role, and then assign that role to the EC2 instance, run Terraform plan and apply. So there is no files. First files we're going to create provider.tf. And the next file we're going to create, let's create variables first, variable.tf. Just define 4 variables. One for AMI, one for region, another one for project, just for tagging purpose, and then my system. This is the public IP of my system so that I can allow in the security group to access that Jenkins server. Next resource, we are going to create EC2 instance, Jenkins EC2. These are the resources I'm going to define here. And then we're going to define a tag just for it's a project name and then operating system Ubuntu. And then we're going to specify the user data for installing Jenkins server. Basically update all the package and then install Jenkins and Java because Jenkins requires Java, and then firewall rules, pip installation to install AWS CLI, and then we install Terraform latest binary. In the real scenario, what you do is you are not gonna install all the packages. I just wanted to show you what are the dependent packages you need. But in your project, what you do is you install all of these applications and create an AMI out of it and use that AMI for your Terraform code. That's all for EC2 instance. And let's go create policy then. IAM policy.tf, here it is, and then IAM role, IAM role.tf, and then this role should attach that policy, right? So here is the IAM role, information. Each and every role has an assume role policy, and you have to define one. And in this case, EC2 instance is assuming that role, so the principal service is EC2 Amazon AWS.com. We're going to define instance profile. It's a separate resource, takes input as a role name. So next resource, we're going to create security group to attach to the EC2 instance. Let's do that. Security group. I don't have much rules, ingress rule defined now. Just I'm allowing 22 for SSH and 8080 for Jenkins, and egress, everything is allowed. So instance role has to be assigned. We created the role, we have to assign the role to the instance. Instance profile equals to this. I am instance profile dot EC2 instance EC2 profile dot name. We're going to attach security group for the EC2 instance. Interpolate the security group ID and use it here. All the codes are updated. Let's go to command line, see all the files here. No, first Terraform init. All right, Terraform validate to validate the syntax. Looks like all good. Now Terraform plan. Looks like all is well. Only the warning, because Terraform started deprecating the old syntax for the interpolation. So it deprecating the interpolation only expressions like this. All right, so total it's creating 5 to add, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. Okay, we're good. So Terraform apply, proof. So one thing is we are not using here a remote state bucket. So all the states are stored locally, just for the simplicity purpose. All right, instance is created. Let's go to console and see. Refresh. There it is, and it is a public IP. Let's log into the instance. Go. Logged in. Now I'm going to monitor user data, the outputs of the commands we configured in user data. F like this. So it might take 5 to 6 minutes to finish all the commands. So I'm going to fast forward that video for you. Installation is completed. Just to Control C here, you see there is no credential configuration. If I run AWS S3 ls, it should give me the output. Oops, operation access denied. That's because I think we have some problem with the policy. Let's look at the policy, what's going there. I think the thing we missed is we have not attached that policy to the role. Let's attach that policy to the role. I think that's the reason, even though role is assigned, but because policy is not attached, so it's not working. Let's go to command line and run Terraform plan and apply again. So it's attaching the policy. Okay, all right, apply, approve. And now if I run AWS S3 ls, it should work. There you go, it worked. So that was the mistake. Without any credential, we are able to access S3 services. Let's try EC2 instance, whether we are able to access or not. AWS EC2, just a simple command, describe instance -- region equals to US East 1. I think it's the instances. There you go. You can also get the output as a text. Output equals to, I think it's output equals to text. Okay, there it is. Here is the EC2 instance, is the public IP. I'm gonna access Jenkins server http :that IP :8080. I should be able to access it. There you go. Jenkins server is up and running, and it's asking me to provide this password. I'm already logged into the instance. I'm just gonna open that file and copy paste this and paste it here. I'm going to choose install suggested plugins. It might take few minutes. Here you go. Here's a URL. I'm going to copy paste for future use. Okay. Save and finish. Start using Jenkins. You can create a new job. You can go for freestyle project or pipeline. I'm going to show you build server and I'm going to create freestyle project. Okay. Description is just building web server, and this is a GitHub project. Let's say I'm gonna use my GitHub repo here. Here is my URL. Okay, this is a git code. Again, this is a URL, and I'm going to add credentials. I'm not providing any ID or description information, just say add. Credential is added. I'm gonna select that credential here. I'm going to build, execute a cell. Let's say I'm just going to run a Terraform plan and apply. Let's say I'm not gonna run apply because it's gonna create a resource again. I just want to show you that the simple project, how it works. In this repo, there are folders. If I go to, let's say, IAM project, policy, cd that folder, and just wanted to see which folder I am in, and then Terraform plan, Terraform init, Terraform plan. I'm not running apply here. There you go. If I build now, it's going to build. Let's go to the log. There you go. It's downloading and it's successful. It ran Terraform plan. Instead of Terraform plan, if you just do Terraform apply, after that it's gonna create that stack, policy and role, the stack I specified in the job. And also one part is missing. Most of the, it's a very common use case is to have continuous integration, CI. So in order to do CI, you can use GitHub webhook, so that we don't have to manually run this job every time. So whenever someone check in their code in GitHub, automatically the build process should start. So the way you do that, you just go to the manage Jenkins and you need to install a plugins. Go to available one, search for GitHub, go to GitHub integration. That's the one you have to install, download and install. After restart, go. I'm gonna select restart Jenkins. It might take few minutes to comes up again. It's installing the plugins. While it's doing the installation, let's configure the webhook on the GitHub side. So you go to that repo and go to settings. That's where we're going to create webhook. I have the old one. I'm gonna delete, and it's asking me to log in again. So add webhook, and in the URL we used that URL, copied the URL earlier. I'm gonna use that URL / you just say GitHub webhook. So when you say GitHub webhook, it basically, when it request goes to Jenkins, I'm sending the request, send the request to GitHub plugin. And I'm gonna select application JSON, no secret. I'm gonna do only the push event to GitHub. Whenever any check-in happens, push happens to the GitHub repo, it's gonna trigger that job, add webhook. And so another thing we need to do is we need to allow the security group of the instance. GitHub webhook is trying to access the EC2 instance in AWS. So AWS EC2 instance security group should allow the traffic from the GitHub webhook IPs. So in order to do that, there is a website called apigithub.com/meta. There are 3 IPs you need to and these IPs keep changes. Okay, so for now we're going to allow traffic from these 3 IPs to the security group of that EC2 instance where Jenkins is running. We're going to update in the Terraform code always. We're allowing for 8080, run Terraform plan and apply. I just need to approve. Yes. So we already did a build, right? Now we're gonna configure trigger in that job. Here's a configuration. So what we're gonna do, we said it's a GitHub project, we said it's a git URL, and then we're gonna say build trigger. We say GitHub hook trigger, right? And every time it's gonna trigger, I would suggest to clear the workspace and download the repo again before it runs the job. That's all. Just say apply and saved. I'm in the same GitHub repo. I am role policy, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna update the tag. Let's say I'm going to update, I'm gonna create this tag project I am role. Okay, git status, I'm gonna push this change, git git commit -m update tag. Oops, something. Okay, git push master. So as I'm pushing this change to the GitHub, it should trigger a, there you go, it's triggered the build job number 2 here. And if I go to that log, it is running that Terraform and it is successful. See, that's how you configure webhook. Make sure couple of things. One is allow security group, right? Whitelist the security group so that GitHub can make a post request to your Jenkins, right? And then second thing is configure your webhook in your GitHub repository. And the third is in the configuration of the job, you have to configure the trigger, right? If you go to configure and you have to check mark this trigger option, this build triggers, right? I hope this helped you to understand how to write your Terraform code to build your Jenkins server. Now once Jenkins server is up, you can create all kinds of automation, CI/CD pipelines, and if you are in DevOps, you're probably working day and night on this Jenkins server. But it is very common. I thought it may be helpful because it's very common requirement to build a Jenkins server, and if you have a Terraform code to build a Jenkins server, it would be very easy to update the code and update the policy roles. It will be in one place and very easy to manage your Jenkins server. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next real world project.